Welcome to Whitetail Rendezvous, hosted by Bruce Hutchin. I'm so happy you joined us today, and you're going to find out a lot about whitetail hunting on the show. This is Whitetail Rendezvous Podcast, episode number 370. Hey, folks, we got a new sponsor. It's called Buckwild Coffee. What's so special about Buckwild Coffee? Well, a gazillion people go to Starbucks every day and drink coffee. Well, why shouldn't Buckwild Coffee offer you light, medium, or dark roast with free shipping? All you have to do is go to whitetailrendezvous.com, go to shop, and order your coffee, and I'll ship it out for free. Hey, thanks so much for visiting Buckwild Coffee. The best brew in the West, the best brew around the campfire, the best brew in the hunting shack, the best brew anywhere. Buckwild Coffee. Get yours today. 7. On today's show, we welcome Dan Wolff. Now, Dan is a suburban buck hunter, DIY suburban buck hunter outside of Boston, Massachusetts. And if that's not enough, he's also called Dan Mr. TickEase. Well, he's developed a tool to get ticks off your body, off your dog or cat's body, or anybody's body, because ticks are a big problem out east. And he's got a solution. So between suburban deer hunting tips and tactics and taking care of ticks, well, altogether, it's a fabulous show. So Dan Wolff from Massachusetts, welcome to Whitetail Rendezvous. It's never too early to think about food plots. Whitetail Rendezvous has an ebook for you. Just simply text 33444 food plot to get your copy. Welcome to a special episode of Whitetail Rendezvous. What's so special? We're heading out to the Massachusetts area. We're going to talk to Dan Wolff. Dan Wolff is the president and founder of TickEase Incorporated. Also, he is a certified, verified, homogenized suburban deer hunter. He knows it well. So we're going to talk about all those things in the next 45 minutes. Dan Wolff, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you so much, Bruce. It's really a pleasure. And, since we set up this appointment to chat, I had a chance to look at some of the stuff that you've been doing. And let me tell you, I'm really impressed. And I'm really pleased to be here with somebody so dedicated to what they're doing.
Well, I've been doing it. I've been hunting whitetails for 50 years. And it's something that I love. And the thing I love about it is meeting people from all over North America and sharing just tips and techniques. And it's pretty eclectic because some people like you are going to talk about, ticks, and Lyme disease is a problem. I don't care where you are. It's a problem. You got ticks, you got problems. So let's just start off with why TickEase and how that all came together.
Sure, Bruce. That's not a problem. Like you, am an avid and obsessive, I would say, whitetail deer hunter. Only, you're out in Wisconsin. I'm out here in a very liberal part of Massachusetts, right near the Boston area. So we have our own set of challenges, and our deer hunting in Massachusetts in certain areas is really focused in more or less suburban or neighborhood settings. So about 25 years ago, I wanted to be able to look for deer and hunt for deer close to home. So I kind of started exploring and doing my research. And what I found was that there were suitable private land owners who would be willing to allow, with written permission in this state, bow hunters come on their property and try to remove some of their problem or nuisance deer at the time. And back then, these landowners were complaining because the deer densities were substantially increasing and they were causing a lot of personal property damage, like shrubs and other things around the house. So it's interesting that after about 10 years of doing that in these affluent suburban areas outside of Boston, we discovered that the incidences of Lyme disease were starting to skyrocket, and people were starting to take notice of this. And so when I asked my landowners, what's the primary reason that you consider these deer to be nuisances, they initially responded because they eat everything in the winter. And then that shifted into we're really scared for our pets and our children about getting Lyme disease.
And thanks for that. So I noticed, in your bio, you also founded Mass Deer Service. Is that go hand in hand with the deer management program you've got in force?
Yeah, that's correct. Mass Deer Service at the time was a unique business, and I say business because we did actually bring in some money, but it was more like a hobby. And my my now ex-wife, maybe that's the reason she's an ex, was not too thrilled with the amount of time and effort and even money that I was spending on that. But listen, it was my passion. I got an opportunity that was unlike what most people experience, in that with plenty of excess or surplus doe tags available and deer densities exceeding 25 to 30 per mile in certain neighborhoods, we were able to harvest just tremendous amounts of deer. Not only just does for our freezer, in which I shared meat freely with many, many different people over the years, but also to have an opportunity to take large bucks that really had not had a lot of hunting pressure. We're living in environments that were less stressful, let's say, than living out in the big woods for sure. And I'm looking here and on my wall right now, and I've got a 185 and 7/8 inch non-typical that I took, I don't know, 16 miles outside of the center of Boston. So it's it provided a lot of good opportunities. But what I did in Mass Deer Service was I went out and recruited or signed up property owners who had appropriate criteria, met the criteria for the state to allow bow hunting, got written permission from them, and then had bow hunters come to me with an interest to participate in what I called the network. And they went through a rigorous process to be deemed eligible for access to my properties in the network. And that process basically included some legal stuff, contracts, code of ethics, non-disclosure, non-compete forms, and a waiver of liability so that I was not held responsible should any accident occur, falling out of a tree or anything of that nature. And then we had a certified archery instructor that would examine their equipment, their form, and their proficiency. Once the applicants were accepted or became eligible for the network, they would pay Mass Deer Service an annual fee, but they were dispatched or assigned to an individual private property with tons of deer on it on an annual basis, and they got to hunt that property exclusively unless something out of the ordinary happened. The landowners died, they moved, they decided not to do it anymore. But that was really the gist of the program, and it was unique. And unfortunately, here in this, again, liberal state, we got a lot of raised eyebrows, shall we say, from groups like Mass Wildlife and particularly the environmental police, because, of course, it seems so legitimate, it seems so common sense, but nobody had run it like a business before. And so they were very suspicious of our activities and had a close eye on us, let's just say. Unfortunately, the business is not currently active, but for a long time, it was really a lot of fun. And all my members were professional people. They could go to work, they could hunt, they could get deer and still be able to pick up the kids and do all that stuff. So it was just a convenience cost to them more than anything else. And everybody was getting, I would say anywhere between 2 and 4 deer per season per property would be totally reasonable. And so we had many, many people sign back up year after year. So it was a great program.
And so it's defunct at this point in time. It is defunct.
Well, yes, and I'll tell you the reason why is that in the past 10 or 15 years, being in the woods so much through my preseason scouting, cameras, tree stand setting, all of that activity, I became a person, or I became somebody who could be referred to as a tick magnet. And I've been bitten more than 200 times by deer ticks. And for some unknown reason, I actually have remained disease-free as far as I know. But many, many, many people in my area and my friends and peers were not so lucky. So as you may or may not be aware, and as your listeners may or may not be aware, that Lyme disease is a huge problem. But it's not the only problem that ticks bring. The situation here in our country right now and spreading northward and to other parts around the world is that there are now more types of ticks showing up. There's plenty of more infections that you can get. Lyme disease is a bacteria. Now you can get a virus. Now you can get parasites. And some of these are transmitted, rather quickly once the tick attaches to the host or yourself. For example, Powassan virus, which in a small percentage of people can be fatal, that can be transmitted within 15 minutes. So the old adage, when you get a tick on you, you got 24 hours or 36 hours because that's how long it takes Lyme to be transmitted, doesn't necessarily apply, maybe for Lyme, but not for things like Babesia, anaplasmosis, Rocky Mountain spotted fever, Powassan virus. And these are all very, very serious illnesses or infections that you can get. And depending on your risk factor, some can and have been fatal. So it's a very, very tricky thing. We've now welcomed, not with open arms, but the Lone Star tick to Massachusetts. And some of my buddies who are in research have now identified established colonies down in the southern part of our state. And they're moving. Long Island is just covered with them now. And they may even actually take over where the deer tick left off. Now, the Lone Star tick has its own set of problems. Unlike the deer tick that transmits a lot of Lyme, this one transmits something called Ehrlichia or ehrlichiosis, which is a bacterial infection. But some people that get bitten by Lone Star ticks can develop this crazy allergy to red meat. And you don't know when it's going to hit you. You could be a month later sitting at a restaurant having a steak or some ribs, and all of a sudden you could potentially go into anaphylactic shock, and it has been very problematic. So it's really important for people like you and I, who are avid outdoorsmen and avid hunters, fishermen, even bikers, hikers, golfers, dog walkers, anybody that's living in tick endemic areas, to just do a few simple things in the prevention arena to help reduce their risk of exposure.
And what are those simple things?
Well, simple things. Number one, and by the way, Bruce, they call me Tickman Dan up here. So Tickman Dan is all about prevention and education. And what I've done is I've created some educational media, like a PSA. And my big thing is what I call, or my battle cry is, Tickman Dan says, don't neglect your crevices. And what do I mean by that? Well, don't neglect your crevices means get into the routine of checking yourselves. This is the single most important thing you can do to prevent illness. Just check yourself thoroughly after you've been outside or been exposed to an area where ticks live. I tell people with smaller kids, because right now, children between the ages of around 5 to 9 are at the highest risk, boys in particular. And more than 200 kids on average in the U.S. are diagnosed with Lyme disease daily. So that is a big problem. Fortunately, kids usually can respond and from treatment and get better. They're very resilient. But unfortunately, with some children, especially with the teens, they can experience this debilitating long-term illness that can keep. I've heard hundreds and hundreds of stories that will break your heart. So prevention. Kids go outside, particularly in the fall when the adult deer ticks are very active, which doesn't mean let your guard down in the spring, because spring nymphal stage ticks are active and they're actually smaller. So you have to be even more careful when doing your tick checks. But the kids, don't let them set foot in the house, strip them down, throw their clothes in a hot dryer for about 15, 20 minutes. Ticks do not like dry heat. So a dryer is a perfect incinerator for them. They will flake away. And so that's the good news. And then once the kids are naked, or practically naked, then you can do a quick examination on them, throw them in the shower, whatever you want to do. But the thing is, you've got to get into these routines, tick checks. And then also there's other things like permethrin, which is it's actually a synthetic, and I don't want everybody to freak out about that, but it's the same chemical makeup as a naturally occurring extract from the chrysanthemum flower. So in the concentration that is used for killing ticks. It's not a repellent. It's what's called an acaricide. And acaricides, the term side is death. So if ticks come in contact with a material that's been treated with permethrin, they will eventually fall off. They'll fall off and eventually they'll die. So unlike a repellent like a DEET or a frontline free animal, ticks don't like it and will fall off, and many of them will remain alive, and that means that they're potentially looking for you at a later date. So I'm a big fan of permethrin for even your animals. They sell bandanas and clothing and all sorts of things. You can even go and get your own spray, treat your clothing yourself. Here's the deal, though. You treat the clothing, not the skin, with permethrin. So what you do is you spray it on your clothes. I recommend, if you're going to do it yourself, turn the clothes inside out and do both sides of your apparel. Spray it good and let it dry completely. That way it's totally safe for you and your dog. For some reason, it does not agree with cats, so keep that in mind. And then you will have, it doesn't have an odor, so if you're hunting, you should be fine with that. And that'll be, hands down, I think, your best defense out in the woods against ticks. So I know that was a kind of a long-winded answer.
No, but that's good. And the reason it's good, Dan, is if you use and go out into the outdoors, any place that there's a foliage, grass, whatever, dogs, cats, whatever, if you're in these areas, and as far as I know, ticks are everywhere in the United States except the Southwest. Is that correct?
They are everywhere in the United States. Lyme disease has shown up in all states except for Hawaii, I believe, at this point.
Okay.
We have Lyme in 50% of all U.S. counties. They may have different non-Lyme carrying ticks in the Southwest, but they do have the brown dog tick, and actually some homes are getting infested where they're actually reproducing indoors.
So, folks, listeners, this isn't going to be a scientific white paper, but I thought it was important because I have listeners all over North America and across the globe, actually, that it's our responsibility, it's your responsibility. I can remember 2 years ago, I was up in Buffalo County hunting whitetails, came in, took my shower, and went, and I did a crevice exam, and I realized, oh, that's not there, and I tried to burn it off, and I tried to take my tweezers, couldn't do it, so I had to go to my buddy and knocked on his door and said, hey, he says, what are you doing here? Because I just got out of the shower. And I said, I got a tick, and we got to get it off. And he goes, okay. So he did that. And then he checked himself, said, son of a gun, I got one too. And so do it. I mean, because Lyme disease can be hideous. Any diseases carried by ticks can be hideous. So saying that, let's roll it back on to suburban hunting, because I've got a lot of friends, especially in the East, out where I hunt in Wisconsin. I live out in Colorado, and we have a lot of recreational users, but we have some tremendous bucks in some of the suburban areas. Why? Because they're pioneering up all the drainages. So the Arkansas River has them, the Platte River has them, and they're finding a way up these drainages, not unlike the old fur trappers. They found the drainages and kept going until they hit the Rocky Mountains. Well, the whitetails are doing the same thing, folks. So having said that, let's deep dive for the next 10 minutes or so into suburban deer, how you hunt them, how do you get permission, the whole book on it. But before we do that, how do people reach out to you, Dan? I want to get that in at the front end of the show here.
Oh, sure, Bruce. There's a couple of ways. The easiest way to get me is just go to my website, and it's www.TickEase.com. That's TickEase.com. And I hope that I'll have a chance to let you know more about how I came up with the tick removal tool that I patented, and why I think that that's probably the best way to safely and effectively remove ticks. But they can reach me at the website, or I have a toll-free number, which is easy to remember. It's 855-TICK-READY, and I will reply personally to all calls. So that's 855-TICK-READY.
Thank you for that. So I just moved to Boston, and I'm working. I don't know where I'm working, but I'm working downtown. I live sort of kind of near the Cape. and I love hunting whitetails. What do I do? How do I connect? We don't have the mass deer service anymore, so what do I do?
Well, the nice thing about technology is that social media really is a good way to network. And I think a lot of our hunting population here is now on some sort of local, or we have a Boston Bow Hunters a Facebook page with like 2,000 members on it. We also have Northeast Big Bucks Club. So these are great resources. And what I find is, of course, between hunters, we often have squabbles and people that don't necessarily agree on everything. But overall, the feeling of at least the Boston Bow Hunters Facebook page is it's designed for people to help others. We would be able to meet with people and, go hunting together on public land, or go shed hunting after the season's over, or answer questions about what kind of cameras work the best, or what, anything like that, because we have old timers like myself who are very experienced, and then we have newcomers that are looking for guidance. And I think it really gives us a sense of it's a rewarding experience for us old guys to impart some knowledge and even set things up where we can take a young guy hunting or a young lady hunting and hopefully have them experience their first kill, or show them how to gut a deer and that kind of thing. So these groups are great. Mass Deer Service, we used to do direct mailings to the property owners themselves, and word of mouth was really the way that the bow hunters got in touch with me. But you're right, that's no longer available. Mass Wildlife does have access, or will provide information on wildlife management areas that are available for hunting. But what I'm finding is that the good public spots tend to get a little crowded, and that's when you get territorial. The territorial nature of hunters kind of comes out. Fortunately for me, I'm strictly a private land guy, so I try to avoid the public properties.
Well, I'm going to call Bob Kraft and see if he'll let me on, or maybe Tom Brady or Gronk. Does Gronk hunt?
He doesn't, but we have a member of the Bruins that we're going to be a very prominent member of the Bruins that we're hoping to get into one of our little hunting groups and take him out during this upcoming season. But I think what would be kind of cool is if we could let a few deer out in Gillette Stadium, and then we could, retrofit like a special football, and then have Tom, try to get a deer from about 50 yards away.
Whitetail Rendezvous is pleased to announce a partnership with GoHunt.com. Who's GoHunt.com? Well, if you're a DIY hunter, you need the information at GoHunt.com/insider. Why? Because it provides 4,200 profiles, every unit, every species, and every season. Furthermore, they give in-depth analysis, interactive maps, unit access, and seasonal trends. Draw odds are very important, and they give you the most accurate information in the business. All this is available when you go to GoHunt.com/insider. Make sure you use promo code WR when you join Insider. You'll get a $50 gift card for GoHunt.com Gear Shop. All in all, if you're hunting out west in 2018, GoHunt.com Insider is where you need to be to get all the research information. When you use promo code WR, Whitetail Rendezvous receives a small commission from GoHunt.com. Whatever. I ain't going there. Sorry. I'm going to leave that one. Tom Brady and footballs, he's had enough issues, so let's give Tom a pass on that for sure.
Yeah, no problem.
But anyway, so how do I approach, Bob Kraft or a guy, he's got some acreage.
Mm-hmm.
What's the minimum acreage you're hunting on?
Well, I've met Bob, actually, and his particular property is in Brookline, Mass., which is just outside of Boston, so it would not be appropriate. But if you were trying to reach out, I mean, my process was somewhat complicated, and there really was an art to it. What I would do is, now that we have all these good satellite images and what they call GIS mapping for neighborhoods, I would basically look for areas that I would have some idea that would have high deer densities. And, mainly around town conservation land, we have a lot of that in certain areas. And I would identify the roads and the homes on these perimeters. At that point, what I would do is then I would pull up these GIS maps and find the street names and the addresses. So I'd be cross-referencing that with like Yellow Pages, or the towns often have street directories with the names of individuals. And then I would try to either contact them directly by phone, and let them know, in a very professional and polite way, to mention that, we're involved with deer management, because the problem of Lyme disease and deer property destruction is increasing, as you may or may not know, sir or madam, in your area. And we've been working on this for X number of years. I was wondering if you wouldn't mind if I came over and had a look at your property and maybe could give you some advice on how to reduce these issues. So, instead of just knocking on the door, maybe not dressed so well, or you've just come from work and saying, hey, can I kill some deer on your property? It's really a more polished approach that I think will allow them to realize that, number one, you're serious. Number two, you can be respectful and responsible, because comfort is the number one thing, at least in liberal Eastern Massachusetts, that you really need to be aware of. So promise them venison, promise them you will leave their property better than you found it. If there's garbage, clean it up. Tell them if there's trees that come down, offer to help. These are all important things that will help the landowner respect you more and feel more comfortable with you going on their properties, because a lot of them are very sensitive to what the neighbors think. And believe me, I've been picketed. I've had people come in my face and scream that they were going to kill me if I kill a deer. I've had one lady, I was coming out with a 50 caliber muzzleloader, and she said if she saw me out there, she would jump in front of between me and a deer. And I'm thinking to myself, well, if my gun is up with a 50 caliber muzzleloader and this lady is jumping in between us, I think there's a little bit of a problem here. So anyway,
I would document anything like that. That's for sure. Let's switch it up. Okay. So, I'm trying to think of somebody noteworthy, not the football players. It doesn't matter. But anyway, so I get on your property. You're Mr. Landowner, and you have 1 acre, 5 acres, 10 acres.
Well,
what's the typical parcel that you're hunting?
Yeah, I mean, it depends. I've hunted on a 2-acre piece at the very end of a cul-de-sac surrounded by conservation woods. In Massachusetts, the state requires that you have at least, even for bow hunting, which is I just can't even comprehend how they would even compare firearms to bow hunting. I understand for firearms, but 500 feet with a bow is ridiculous, and I think they should change that rule pretty darn quick. But for now, you need to be at least 500 feet from the nearest unauthorized landowner, from their dwelling, or their what they call building in use now, which is a vague term that they can discern either way at their own discretion. So a 2-acre piece at the very tip of a cul-de-sac is fine if you backs. But I've also hunted on 55-acre pieces in some of these towns. See, Boston has some affluent areas and where there's people that actually have 5 to 10 to 15 to even 20 acres is not that unusual. They're limited, so it helps to be, it helps to get that property and maintain it. But it's a variety of things. The nice thing about it is that you're never too far in the woods. And we joke sometimes and say, hey, if I can't see my truck while I'm sitting in my tree stand, we're too far in. And in some cases, I'm smelling coffee and bacon in the morning when I'm sitting in my tree stand waiting for 6 to 8 deer to come parading by and be followed up by a giant buck. So they're still deer, and they still can be patterned and move around, and we got to think like a deer, but they're surviving very well in these neighborhoods.
I know they are. And let's talk about stance sets. Now, I'm just going to take 5 acres. How do you do your stand sets, and do you have to take your stand down every time you exit?
Well, no. not every time you exit the property. And many of my landowners that I've worked with over the years will just allow me to leave them up all the time. All I do is go back and check them and replace straps when they get worn and that kind of thing. But I'm an avid believer in ladder stands. Some of my friends are hang-ons and climbers. I don't find it necessary in this ever-changing environment that suburban environment that the deer live in. They see sheds go up. They see people chainsawing. They see swing sets go up. They see all sorts of man-made structures up and down constantly. They're also used to a lot of human odor. And so while I wouldn't take a ladder stand and throw it up in the middle of a big woods hunt, let's say in northern Maine or western New York, I've got about 30 very comfortable ladder stands set up around the area right now as we speak. And they are comfortable, they are safe, and they produce deer year after year. So the deer are very well used to them. And it depends on if on public land, you only have 30 days at a time to keep a stand up, and you do have to remove those at the end of the season. But on private property, it's really up to the landowner, and most of them don't make me take them down, which is good. I don't have to store them.
Let's talk about scent control, because I heard, we got steaks grilling, we got ham and eggs cooking, we got coffee, we got bagels and donuts, we got birthday parties. How do you figure out when the minimum use by Mr. Landowner is going to be, and so you can hunt? Because obviously during the rut you want to be in your stand all day, but if they're having a birthday party, you don't want Mr. Wonderful running out there and doing a head first into the
right. Well, that's something you just got to get used to. Certainly, it's cold up here in Boston, so there's not a lot of outdoor activity. Sometimes when it's milder and in October, we still get kids playing around, but you kind of figure out where the kids are and where the dogs are. A lot of problems we experience are dog walkers coming right under our stands, but I've observed deer that they just stop and look. And when the dog walkers, they walk down the trails, the deer are right off the trail. They'll just stand there and look. And then when the dog and the dog walkers, leave, then they go about their regular activity. But as far as scent control is concerned, I do practice good scent control, and I do recommend it, even though those deer are used to this type of these types of scents. In my opinion, what I'd say is always, always, always practice as much good scent control as you can, regardless of your situation, but be aware that you don't have to be completely anal about it. I don't think you need to wear the rubber gloves when you're setting stands, or, do it in the rain or anything like that, like you would do out in the, bigger woods, because I think those types of smells that linger are pretty accepted by the deer. But certainly when you're up in your stand, you want to use all your scent killer products for your showers and your clothing, and everything is separated. So typical stuff. I use ozonics as well, and I have an ozone bag in my closet that I'll treat my clothing with, plus scent lock and scent killer detergent, shampoo, soap, and all that stuff. So it's still important. They're still very astute when it comes to that, but they are much more used to scent than some of these wilder deer, I should say.
How do I get my deer out? So I shot him. He's in the woods. He's not on the manicured lawn. So he's in the woods, or she's in the woods. The doe is in the woods. How do I get it out of there?
Well, you got to ask these questions to the landowner beforehand. How do you want me to deal with the deer? How do you want me to deal with the field dressing? Some of them, they don't care. Others have dogs. They're like, last year you did it. My dog ate it and got sick. So you want to avoid that if you want to continue to be on the good side of these landowners. So mostly we're bagging the guts. I do like to field dress the deer as soon as I kill it. Bag those guts, and we'll put it in. I have a jet sled that we carry in and out. We're not going tremendous distances here. So as a matter of fact, that big deer I was telling you about earlier, I shot with my muzzle loader. It did a giant circle and it died right at the edge of the driveway. So it was very nice of him to come right back to where my truck was, and it was simply just gut and pick him up, and he was back in the truck. So,
one thing that we use on the farm, I hunt in Wisconsin, and Judd Cooney, Sherry Yarborough uses all the time in at their farms in Iowa with Iowa Trophy Whitetail Outfitters, is that they take these big sled black cattle feeder type things, and they just tow it in. They just put the whole animal in there. They don't field dress it at all, and then they pull it out. Obviously, it's not off a driveway, but it could be up a hill, down a hill. But then they take it, throw it in the back of the pickup, go back to the barn, and drop everything. They hang it up, drop everything right into this bucket. Then they go to their respective, disposal places, and that has worked so well because one, there's no guts, there's no anything. You're not leaving dead scent around. And I like that technique. And you said you have a rocket sled. So, think about that. If you have a place you can go and hang the deer and get rid of all the pieces, that makes it real clean because you go into a sled, you slide it out and put it in the back of the pickup and you're gone. And the deer is gone. There's no evidence. There might be some blood on the ground, but that'll wash off in the next rain or snowstorm. So, that's one of my thoughts to people who listen to this. If you're doing that, check it out. Just go to any seed and feed place and say, I need a 5 foot, 6 foot heavy black rubber sled and spend the $50 or whatever, because that would be the slickest thing for me. Just pop it in there. You can do it yourself. I mean, because you're even if it's a 200-pound deer, you can slide that yourself.
Well, yeah.
It's
somewhat more difficult with this type of terrain. I found, of course, when there's snow on the ground, it's a cinch. I mean, it's so awesome when there's snow on the ground. But I use the jet sled, the medium-sized one, and what I do is they give you a little tiny nylon rope, which is really inadequate in my opinion. So what I do is I get some real thick rope. I'll drill out a bigger hole. I'll put a knot in it, and then I'll have 2 loops, one on either side, and I'll attach a heavy-duty carabiner in the middle. That way, if I have a buddy with me, we can just unsnap the 2 loops, and then each of us can pull, and it makes removal very easy. And again, you just hoist that thing right up in the back of the pickup. There's no blood or in your SUV, and everything is contained, and then you can hang your deer or bring it to the butcher or whatever you want to do at that point.
And thanks for that. One thing I'll add, you can just harness up a climbing harness, anything, a good solid web harness, and just take that carabiner and hook it in the back, and you'd be surprised how much you can pull, even on dry land.
I get it. And they even have runners now you can attach to the bottom of the jet sleds. They're kind of like thick Teflon runners. Makes it easier for going over pavement or gravel or dirt roads.
So there it is on that. Let's slip it back to TickEase, because I before the show checked out, and you do have a patented tick removal tool. So let's talk about that and take a little infomercial time here and tell the folks about it and where they can see it.
Well, I thought you'd never asked, Bruce. Actually, as I mentioned,
you're funny.
As I mentioned before, I've been bitten by more than 200 ticks in my life. And they were all deer ticks, so I assume that probably about 50 or 60% of those ticks that bit me did carry that bacteria or some sort of bacteria. And for some reason, I don't know why, maybe I've developed some kind of resistance to tick-borne illness, but I'm not complaining. But the problem was, I'm a single dad with 2 boys, and I had 2 dogs at the time. I was bringing, I used to get, 100 ticks on me in an hour or 2 setting stands was not unusual. So we were in areas that were just infested with deer ticks. So I would then start finding them around. My dogs were getting them. Have you ever stepped on a fully engorged deer tick that fell off your dog with bare feet? It's not a pretty thing in your home. It's like stepping on a ketchup packet. It's disgusting. So I was getting them. My kids started getting them. They were in my laundry room, in my hunting clothes. They were in my car. I even pulled my bed sheets off one night, and there was a tick in my bed. So I would come home with ticks stuck in me, and I'm thinking, oh, man, I heard the dangers of Lyme, and I wanted to make sure that I was doing proper tick removal, because I'd heard so many different ways. Do I heat it up? Do I put substance on it? How do I get this tick out of me so I'm really not increasing my exposure to disease? So all of my research pointed to some sites that would claim that very fine tip tweezers are absolutely the best way to go, and you basically are going to pinch the tick with the very tip of the pointy tweezer and squeeze and lift straight out. And that's all you need to do, because some people believe that if you heat that tick, or if you agitate it or traumatize it with poison or any other way, or squeeze it in the wrong place with your fingers, you're going to force contents from that tick right into your system. So you don't want to do that, because that's crazy. That's really bad. So please, listeners, do not use any substance. Do not use your fingers on small ticks. Do not use those slotted methods like the tick twister or the tick key or any of those gadgets out there. You don't have to use a TickEase, but please just use a pointy tweezer. Household tweezers are not recommended. Their flat tips will squeeze nymphal ticks in the wrong spot, and also could increase the chance of tearing the mouth parts off on adult deer ticks. So not the way to go. So what I did was I just said to myself, I'm gonna design a better mousetrap. And what I did was I incorporated the two methods for tick remover. One was a pointy tweezer, like everybody, including the CDC, said, and I just angled it so you can use it better. It was designed a little better so you can get close to your skin. And on the back side was a scoop. It was looked like a spatula with a slot in it, a tiny little metal spatula. And that is great for sliding under those big ticks, mainly on your animals. So like you get a big dog tick that's engorged, it looks like a blueberry. This is perfect for that, because you can just wiggle it under the tick and then you steadily pull straight out until it pops out. And that is it, folks. When you pull a tick out and it's alive and kicking and it doesn't look like you've upset it too much, that means you did it right. That tick should be alive and kicking and running around after you remove it, and then you know that you did a good job. Of course, at that point, you're probably going to want to burn the little sucker and kill it and get your revenge out on it. But I don't suggest you doing that. What I suggest is save the tick in a Ziploc bag, write your name on the bag, the date you took it out, excuse me, how long you think you might have had it in you, and where you think you might have gotten it. And then save that. You can put it in the freezer for a couple of days, it'll kill the tick, but save that, because if you should eventually, within a week or two, start to feel like you're getting the flu, you're getting a little chills, you start to ache a little bit, especially in the summertime. That is a big red flag. Or, of course, if you get a bullseye rash or any expanding rash on your body, you want to send that tick into testing. I recommend UMass in Amherst, which is my partner. That website is tickreport.com. Again, tickreport.com, and they can give you all the instructions. And go see your doctor and use that information to determine a treatment, because, for example, a lot of these tick-borne illnesses present very similarly, meaning Lyme disease, anaplasmosis, and babesia can all present with chills and fever and achiness. Now, the thing about it is that Lyme is a bacteria, and babesia, for example, is a parasite similar to malaria. It's not treated the same way. So if your tick tests positive for babesia, negative for Lyme, well, your doctor can figure out a way to effectively treat it with the proper medication. So that's my big tip for you guys. Just to be aware and always save the tick. Don't throw it away, and always use the right tool, because what people don't understand is that using the wrong tool can make people sick. So Bruce, we gotta educate the people.
I'm sick of ticks. Wait a minute. I'm just sick of ticks.
Yeah, well, I'm fascinated.
Oh, I'm not laughing, folks. It's just, there's so many things out there in the outdoors that can get at us. And one thing I thought about the whole talk when Dan was going on and on, you can become a really good friend of the person that thinks you're Darth Vader because you hunt deer, and just say, I know we don't agree on this, but I'd like to give you this tick remover because I know your dogs or your cats or your kids where we live in this neighborhood are going to have ticks. So here's a gift. And, I just want to give it to you because it's a real problem and we're neighbors. And so here it is. And I think folks that might go a long way, especially today that on their wonderful golden retriever, they find this engorged blueberry tick, deer tick, and they take it out, do what you say, and you might be surprised of the goodwill and building as we call it out west, mending fences, because sometimes people don't agree. And so mending fences is good. And my 2 cents on TickEase um, product, a tool, is to just do that. Buy a bunch of them, give them away, and give them away to the people you're hunting their land, especially in suburbia. I don't care where you are, and to say, hey, if you have this problem, here's a tool that I use, works great, simple instructions, and thanks so much. Your thoughts, and then we got to wrap the show.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do that all the time. I mean, every time I go visit a new landowner, I give them something, and it's just a good sales, promotional technique that I've learned over the years. I've been in sales a long time. But yeah, you're absolutely right. And sometimes you get your door slammed in your face, and people are like, "Oh my God, they're beautiful. How can you do such a thing?" And they have closed minds on that. Those types of people, I you won't have a lot of luck with. But the ones with less closed minds can be easily influenced if, in fact, their children have had Lyme disease. And I've seen this myself. Uh, Avid opponents have then changed their tunes when a family member or themselves have been bitten by a tick and received or developed Lyme disease, and then they do it reluctantly. But here's where your comfort level or your ability to make them feel comfortable really can come through. So practice your pitch. Know what to say. Say the right things. Don't say we try to do it as humanely as, to dispatch the animal as humanely as possible or harvest the animal. You don't want to use the K word. You don't want to say kill them.
Dan, we're up against the soft stop. I can give you a minute or so to give some shout outs, tell people how to find your products, how to find you if you wish, and social media. Then we got to wrap the show. I got another show in about 7 minutes.
Okay. Well, Bruce, I told you I could talk a lot.
I know, and you're good. I love listening to you.
Well, I hope your listeners do as well, and I appreciate the opportunity to come on and talk about two of my some of my most favorite things, ticks and deer and hunting and all that stuff. And it's great. Again, I appreciate what you do and appreciate all your listeners. The best way to reach me, again, is through the website at www.tickease.com, TickEase.com. And my toll-free number, which you can get me directly, rings right to my cell during business hours, is 855-TICK-READY. And you may notice there's a few extra digits there, but if you take the DY off the end, it'll work just fine. I wanted to shout out to some of my colleagues and partners, as I mentioned earlier. Dr. Steve Rich runs the Laboratory of Medical Zoology at UMass in Amherst, Massachusetts. They have a wonderful tick testing lab. They can be reached at tickreport.com. And if you ever have any questions or want to send in your tick for testing, they can give you the response, usually within about 72 hours. And they have a full panel of tests that they can conduct, and the tests are 100% accurate. Another partner of mine is Thermacell. Work very closely with them, and they are located up here in Massachusetts. I believe they're at thermacell.com. They do have a tick program where you can distribute tick tubes in your yard, and it'll help kill the ticks on the mice where the bacteria kind of reside. So, again, Bruce, thanks so much. Have me back if you want anytime. I'm available, and good luck to all the listeners out there.
Dan Wolff, on behalf of thousands of listeners. Actually, we went over 125,000 downloads today. It's our anniversary month, 2 years in the business. So thank you, guests and listeners, and thanks, Dan Wolff, for sharing all about TickEase and what you really need to be smart about. I don't care where you are in the country. Be smart about that. Be prevented, and check out his TickEase tool, because it just might be the difference between getting sick and not. So Dan Wolff, thank you so much for being a guest on
And
Whitetail
Bruce,
Rendezvous.
remember, don't neglect your crevices.
Hey, folks, we got a new sponsor. It's called Buckwild Coffee. What's so special about Buckwild Coffee? Well, a gazillion people go to Starbucks every day and drink coffee. Well, why shouldn't Buckwild Coffee offer you light, medium, or dark roast with free shipping? All you have to do is go to whitetailrendezvous.com, go to shop, and order your coffee, and I'll ship it out for free. Hey, thanks so much for visiting Buckwild Coffee. The best brew in the West, the best brew around the campfire, the best brew in the hunting shack, the best brew anywhere. Buckwild Coffee. Get yours today. Hey, the next episode, we're heading down to Athens, Georgia. Rance Thomas is our guest. Rance is the owner and operator of Created Land and Wildlife Solutions. What does all that mean? Well, that means he knows something about whitetails. He knows a whole heck of a lot. He's a land consultant. He's a wildlife consultant. And his brother, Lindsey Thomas, works over there at QDMA. So all together, Rance is a great guy to know. Plus, he's got a heart for the wounded warriors. He's got 80 to 80 project. You'll hear about that on the show. And somewhat of a Nashville singer, so you'll also hear about that.
Thanks for joining us. Be sure to tune in tomorrow for another episode of Whitetail Rendezvous, where you can listen and learn from the experts so you can be more successful on your next hunt. Until next time, listen, learn, and succeed.